I was kind of
the whitetail guy.
MeatEater was depending on me to produce whitetail content.
Yeah.
They had guys who could do the Western stuff.
Yeah.
But they didn't have someone like me who had that whitetail expertise. So,
You're like, I like to elk hunt. They're like, okay, Mark. The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt.
What can we say, man? Another year back with Hoyt. We're both shooting RX8s. I'm shooting 70 pounds in the bourbon, which I love bourbon.
It's great.
And you're shooting 80 pounds in the straight black.
Blacked out as always, man. I got the, so I'm shooting the 500 grain Easton Arrow this year. And at 80 pounds, I'm flinging that thing at like 300 feet per second. I mean, it's deadly. Put a water buffalo in front of me and he's done.
I mean, we shot it earlier. You literally put an arrow through a brand new target, like never been shot before.
I know. So one other thing that Hoyt is doing this year is they're making all their own strings in-house. And so the quality is top notch, and it just really is something that is setting them apart from their competitors.
Well, what we always try to do when we go to our bow shop, Ultimate Outdoors, is we try to shoot other bows just to make sure that we are really giving everybody a fair chance.
Sure.
The reality is it's a no-brainer. Hoyt, it stands above all of them every single time.
Definitely. And so right now you can use code HUNTR, HUNTR, for 20% off any apparel on the Hoyt website. And as always,
get serious, get Hoyt. And we're back.
Ew.
HUNTR Podcast, episode 242.
That it is.
242.
242.
It is...
I was waiting for that. What day is it?
March 4th.
That's my day. It's my check-in. What day is it?
It's March 4th.
When is this going to air?
It's March 4th. If you're listening to this, oh, God, it's the 4th, 11th. It should be March 18th if you're listening to this.
Cool.
Yep. So we're getting there. Right through March.
Chugging through, man. I feel a little bit better once we get, some of these projects underway, and I want to get that Illinois. I want to get to Illinois.
Yep.
I want to get out there and get that done.
Do your part.
Hey, thank you guys for being here, whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. We drop these episodes every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you've written us on Instagram DM or the website, those are the two platforms that we check most often. If we haven't hit you back, sorry about that. We're just, be patient with us there. So we have some merch on the...
pretty good.
Oh, yeah,
I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
I've caught up most of Instagram. I blitzed it the other day.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool. We've got some merch on the website. We got some Nalgene's hats, hoodies, shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. And imagine we'll be doing some more of that this year here.
Yeah, we were just talking about Dustin. I'm going to talk with Dustin about doing some new shirts and stuff like that. And
cool.
Just need to kind of sit down and think about it.
So we'll keep some of that stuff fresh for you guys. And
if you got ideas, let us know.
Yeah. Other than that, here we go.
March 4th. Listen to this. March 18th. Hopefully the weather is turning at this point. And
this coming week, I mean,
up and down
will have happened already. No, but this coming week, as we're sitting here, is going to be getting nice.
Oh yeah, 60, so like 50s and 60s. Yeah. So I've got
ice cream weather.
I've got a lot of pounds of minnows coming. If you're listening to this, coming last week for the pond.
Stocking the pond.
Oh, she looks so good. You just come see it. It's like clear, but like
why does that sound like another slang for like feeding the geese?
Feeding the geese. There are geese there, by the way.
There are geese there, the pond.
Yeah, there's rookie numbers. It's like just a perfect like blue green. Like it looks really good.
Nice,
cool, good flow, water flow into it.
Is it all the way full?
Oh yeah, she's brimmed.
Cool.
Yep. So
how about around it? Is your whatever you planted there growing up?
No,
still dirt.
Yeah. Yeah, but I did clover and some chicory and stuff like that. So, I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks, like that starts to come up. I did some oats and stuff like that too, and normal grasses. So yeah, but it looks good. And erosion, I don't have any issues right now. So that all seems good. So yeah, I've got minnows going in, kind of like the deer hunting side. I put a bunch of structure in there, got a bunch of different structure in there, stocking the minnows for the forage base. And then either the end of this month or first part of April, I've got like 130 trout coming.
Cool.
And then it'll be like,
it's awesome.
That'll be fun.
So will those live year to year then?
I have no idea. Probably not. I don't know. Maybe. So I've got aeration systems in there. It is spring fed. It will stay cool, but like, who knows? Like if we have a summer like we just had, I would assume a lot of them die because it'll just get too warm for them. But it's deep. I mean, the deeper parts of it are 13, 14 feet. So it'll stay cool, and as long as I have that circulation of the pumps going, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. It'll be a lot of fun, at least for several months.
Yeah.
So yeah, the kids will be they're stoked about it, and I'm gonna stock some other ones. I'm gonna put some crappie in there, put some bass in there, put some perch in there and stuff. So bluegill will naturally end up in there. I've got 2 geese that already found it, and so they're like
sweet.
They're like making it home. Little residents already. So yeah, so pretty stoked. The kids are like counting down the days till there's trout in there.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so it should be cool. It's cool to look out and like see the pond there.
Oh yeah.
No, so the deer freaking love it. They've got like 2 highways to the corners that are just like, I mean, just completely beaten down to be drinking out of that thing.
Cool.
Yeah. So got a big water hole.
It's all coming together.
Giant water hole. Yeah. So, but yeah, so weather looks good, and at this point, I think our minds are on farm projects and just trying to, take away as much as we can between now and, planting season.
Head down, man.
I hope that we have favorable conditions this spring, and that I think both you and I are going to do a lot of frost seeding and clover and stuff, and I hope that looks really good going into the summer, because I think that those deer will thrive on that stuff in the summertime, and then obviously going into the season standpoint as well.
Oh yeah. Well, most of mine's already done, so I'm done frost seed and clover, but
so it's just waiting for it to pop at this point.
Yeah, I mean, as far as planting, and I'm not there yet, but it'll be if I do corn and then really beans is the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more in the short term here. It's like, can I get any of that burning done still? They had the pine tree planting project knocked out, and roping in Illinois with whatever.
I think I'm gonna burn. I think I'm gonna burn mostly in April. I think I'm just going to kind of wait till the restrictions come off, or at least getting close and do a couple burns in like those evening hours. Well, we've got at this point spring forward, right? Extra hour daylight.
Next Sunday.
Yeah. If they're listening, this already happened.
Yeah.
So that's perfect. Like that'll give us some extra time. So I might do something on that, just some small scales, just to kind of.
That buys us an extra hour in the evening of light. Oh yeah, that will be nice then.
Oh yeah, yeah, because it's not been getting dark till what? Well, around here it's like 6:37.
Probably.
Yeah, so 7:38.
Yeah, that's what you need.
Yep. So yeah, if you start lighting at 6 o'clock, 5:59.
Yeah, 5:30 ain't gonna hurt nothing. Just moving fast. It's a head flame.
Yeah. What's your clock say? Yeah, it's good. It's always like any of us Pennsylvania guys for trout season, we get the old 8 a.m. on the first day, and now somebody across the creek at like 7:50 is like, close enough.
I know. You hate that, don't you? So, hey, we're all trying to follow the rule here.
I know. I'm like, the anticipation's coming, and then I hear somebody going, got one, and I'm like, it's 7:54. What are you doing?
I need to have like a siren or something go off.
Oh, I told you last year, and it's coming up in a week or so here. We've got that youth fishing trout day. I think it's March 29th this year. So it's a week before the season starts. And last year it was Rieger and Testa and our kids, and we found this like banging section, and there were 12 adults across the creek just ripping them out left and right. And I was like, what's the deal, guys? And they're like, oh, we're just throwing them back. I'm like, you can't fish. It's youth fishing day. And they literally were like, they were assholes about it. They're like, it's not a big deal. Like, it's just, we're throwing them all back. And I'm like, those fish aren't going to bite for the kids now. You just rip their face off with a rooster tail or whatever.
Yeah.
And so
it's pretty lame.
Yeah. Well, this year the warden will have a nice tip on where that's going to be happening on opening morning.
There you go.
Yeah. Nip that down. Kids will be ripping them out left and right then.
There you go.
So, but I was like, come on. It's freaking youth fishing day.
Yeah, that's dumb.
It's like, there is the epitome of abuse of a youth.
I did that
outdoor
day. One time on accident. I found a banging section, and I was like ripping lips. I was like, oh, this, crushing them.
Was that at Sloan Elementary?
No.
You know Sloan Elementary?
No.
That's Kiski area school, I think, right?
I don't know.
They used to stock like this little creek right there in front of the school. And it was, I guess, like a kids only section.
By the library?
Yes.
No, that's not Kiski. That's
Franklin,
I think.
Yeah.
And no. It wasn't that section.
I tripped on that one time.
Yeah. It was a similar deal, though. I found out it wasn't for kids. It was for disabilities.
Oh.
Well, I mean, people.
I think that might be worse.
Yeah. Yeah, probably worse. I can't remember what the sign said, but I honestly didn't see it until after I was done fishing it. It was like at the very end, or maybe it was even the next time I went back, and I was like, what's that sign say? And it's like fishing for disability section only.
How many people drove by and they're like, yeah, I see it.
I mean, it was completely hidden from the road and everything, and nobody else was there, so I don't know. Ripping lefts, dude.
That'll happen.
Ripping lefts.
Yeah, it's just and again, I know
I was like, hey.
Yeah. Disabled. I know it's fishing as compared to hunting, but like those are the things that all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know, maybe people are abusing youth deer season and stuff like that, because like here, these guys clearly don't care.
Right.
And you probably have them out there, but yeah. So anyways, but yeah, so I think farm projects are the big one, and just
work.
Yeah. Just trying to, now's the time. I feel like we just put our head down for 3 or 4 months, and then we look up and it's like, oh, season starts in a month.
Work. Yeah.
So,
just make money.
Yep.
I mean, everything else is happening in the meantime, but you gotta, at some point here, you gotta put the head down. So, because September is going to come quick.
Yeah. Why not?
And when it comes here, I want to have done the work.
Yeah. Why not in the off season? So anyways, we got cool guests today. So we got Mark Kenyon from Wired to Hunt / MeatEater on today. And we were talking to Mark pre-podcast. He's got kind of a tight timeline here, so this might be a little bit of a shorter podcast. But yeah, I'm going to talk to Mark in, I don't know, several years probably. I was on Wired to Hunt, I think once, maybe twice. But it's been a while. So that may have been the last time that I've even talked to Mark, at least, vocally talked to him. I probably have chatted with him in email and Instagram since then. But yeah, so it'd be pretty cool to talk to Mark about kind of evolution of Wired to Hunt into the MeatEater side and kind of his hunting style and stuff. Like, they're doing more content films and stuff, but just what's on the docket, what he's looking for. He's got 2 young kids now. In fact, I saw his, I don't know if I think it's his oldest, found a shed the other day that he was sharing on social media and stuff. And so, yeah, so it'd be a good time to catch up with Mark and just kind of chat through a bunch of stuff.
Sweet.
See what it is. We got you, Mark. What's up, buddy?
Man, I'm excited to be here. Excited to be chatting. Whitetails or whatever in the world you guys want to talk about.
You never know, man, on this podcast where the rabbit holes might go. Sometimes we think so, but we usually don't.
I think it'll all be within my wheelhouse and be a lot of fun. So
I would agree.
I'm game.
Is it a weird contradictive place that we get to where we start just inviting other podcasters to come on each other's podcasts? It's like that seems to be a primary.
It's just a circle.
It's just a circle.
It's a weird circle thing. I don't know what you call that.
Yeah, just a circle.
Yes.
It is funny, man, that medium. Obviously, Mark, so for people that don't know or lived under a rock, right, the Wired to Hunt podcast, when did you start that officially?
Oh, man. The podcast launched either in 2013 or 14, and Wired to Hunt, like the website, started in 08.
So, I mean, could we consider you like the OG of the podcast for the hunting world?
At least up there. I mean, definitely one of the old timers. I don't know if it's the first, but
I think it's got to be. It's got to be close, if not the first. And no knock on everybody nowadays, but it's like everybody's got a podcast now.
Who else was right in there with you? I know I saw the other day Working Classes just did 10 years.
10 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were after, but Peterson's Bow Hunting had a podcast out the fall. I guess it was several years before mine, because I remember the year after I started Wired to Hunt as just a website.
Mm-hmm.
I remember running on the treadmill listening to Peterson's Bow Hunting podcast.
Wow!
So that's the one other one I can remember.
Yeah.
What about Gritty? How long has Brian been doing his?
That was after. That was probably around like 14 or 15, I think, because he reached out to me before he started asking me for advice and stuff.
That's crazy, man.
So, yeah, it's gone by really fast. It's pretty wild.
Well, it definitely seems like, I don't know, the last 5 years, maybe since COVID, has been like, call it the podcast boom, per se, from a media standpoint. Not, obviously, there are quite a few. We just went through them previous to that, but really seems like in the last 5 years, podcast as a medium for communication has just skyrocketed.
I would say so. I mean, just in terms of how many there are, and in terms of, I I guess, yeah. I mean, it's well, I mean, Rogan's been doing. How long has Rogan been doing the Rogan Experience?
That's a good question. A long time.
Yeah. I thought it was like 03 or 04 maybe was like the first parts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even still, I mean, you could argue that it's peaking in terms of like influence, in terms of like, the elections and everything that's happened here
Dare
recently.
To say it was a big swinging point in an election. Yeah.
There's been
I'd say it was pretty important.
And COVID too. I mean, maybe COVID probably has a lot to do with that too. I mean, people looking for new mediums and stuff. And,
well, look at what we're doing here. Like COVID wouldn't have necessarily stopped us from having this conversation. Right. So, I think that's
Rogan. Yeah, so Rogan started in 2009.
Wow.
And the one other thing I was looking up was, did you guys ever hear that podcast called Serial?
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
That one, it was like when that podcast came out was when, at least the larger media started talking about podcasting being this big booming thing. And that thing, when did that launch? That launched in 2014 is when that one launched.
Holy cow, man.
So at least I remember at that time there being a lot of buzz and information about like the podcast economy really kicking in.
Yeah.
And but then I guess maybe for the hunting world it took a little bit longer for it.
We're always behind. Yeah, always behind. Yeah, I think that true. Well, I mean, there you go. So it's 2009 and Rogan, like, that time it really was like, I remember that was kind of the audiobook craze, like basically that listening medium sort of come up. Like I'm assuming like if we look back at like when did Spotify and stuff like that from a music listening standpoint really take off, it was probably all around the same time frame.
Yep.
And so the podcast game I think just played into that. But yeah, Mark, I mean I would say that maybe besides the Peterson one, it's like you were at least the first one that I knew of in the space.
Man, it's been a good run. It's wild. At the time, I never thought it would be what it's become. I was kind of resistant to starting it at first. Funny story is that my dad is kind of a tech nerd, and he had been suggesting to me that I start a podcast for years before I finally did. And I was like, no, Dad, I don't think so. I'm happy just doing the writing and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. I don't think podcasts might be a thing. But then I started really getting into podcasts myself the couple of years prior. Interest kind of in a different world. Mostly I was listening to like business and entrepreneurship podcasts as I was trying to build Wired to Hunt and leave my day job and go full time into this world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was doing a ton of driving back and forth between my day job, listening to these shows, and being inspired and learning so much. And then it finally dawned on me like, geez, this has been such a great medium for you in this other world. Why in the heck isn't there something really good like this in the hunting world? And that was a light bulb moment for me that ended up, definitely helping what I was trying to do.
Seems almost way too obvious now, like in retrospect. Like that's the crazy thing. It's like, it's hard to imagine like these conversations weren't happening, 15 years ago, essentially.
Well, they were. It just they weren't being produced like in a format, and it just like people beforehand probably didn't have the concept of like even today we're like my wife today is like who would listen to you talk for 3 hours?
Yeah, and mine says that all the time.
Apparently, people, what I mean? But I get it too. Even though I'm not a huge consumer of podcasts, like I definitely dabble, like and I'll get bits and pieces from it. I'll jump around, and it gives you some cultural awareness, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. I think mine was the audiobook thing that kind of kicked me down the road, right? Like you mentioned, like I listened to like the Dave Ramsey EntreLeadership and things like that, or Goggins' book,
Green Lights,
Green Lights,
great one, great audio
with
book.
McConaughey, like listening to those like all the time, doing tractor work or whatever, and then I find myself now not really listening to any audiobooks, but it being replaced by podcasts essentially, and just. To your point of dabbling, just covering multiple categories and just listening to podcasts at this point.
Yeah.
I think it's really enabled a deeper exploration of a lot of topics. Prior to podcasts, you can only cover so much ground in an article before someone gets bored with it. You can only cover so much information in a TV show. There were books, but not a whole lot of people were buying hunting books. Sure, some, but nothing to the scale the podcasts are now. So I feel like there's just been this massive learning boom that has coincided with podcasts because you can have these deep dive conversations with so many different people. It's, it's like getting to sit alongside so many different whitetail experts or hunting experts or whatever it is, and learn from their experiences and so much that's just, newly possible given this format. So yeah. It's been pretty transformative.
Well, I mean, we kind of always relate it to, it's like the old school deer camp. I mean, these were the conversations on a local level happening in a deer camp or in the bar and the diner or wherever, right? And, now it's these conversations like Jared and I always talk about. The most flattering thing for us is when we talk to somebody and they're like, man, you guys were discussing this. We talk about that all the time. And it's like, okay, we're not the only ones that are like stewing over whatever it is. And that's cool, right? Because that is the connection that you want the audience to feel is like, we were just talking about that, or that's a great point. I didn't think about that, or whatever it might be. And, being able to do it on a frequency standpoint is probably the biggest opportunity to have those connections with people.
Yeah. It's funny and this isn't true everywhere, but I feel like to some degree there's been a deterioration of actual physical community and like real deer camps and people getting together. And I don't know if this is unique just to whitetail guys and girls, but I do feel like sometimes, at least I find myself so obsessed with like my single-minded pursuit of this deer or that thing that I'm just like hunting on my own, or I go and do a solo trip because I'm the only one who's got time to go do this thing. And you get so focused on the pursuit that sometimes you lose sight of that larger community aspect that for a lot of us is what got us into it.
Yeah.
So that's a whole separate topic, I guess. But the nice thing about, podcasts and these kinds of digital communities is that we can, kind of have a different version of that still and connect with like-minded people and feel like there's someone else who's thinking about the same things we are and care about the same things that we do.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it's a double-edged sword too, that like, whether it's the podcast or just the ability to have this digital connection in general, like, for the last, I don't know, week, trying to think when this, a couple podcasts ago, we had Daniel Storm on from Wisconsin, who's basically their CWD researcher. And I thought Daniel did a really good job talking about some of the latest research and numbers they're seeing and things like that. So because of that, in the last week and a half, I've really kind of put the ear to the social side of like, what are people talking about with CWD? And it's not good. Like there's a lot of loud voices out there. And there's a lot of distrust from the general hunting level, around that. And, I kind of wonder, like in reverse is like 10, 15 years ago, without those significant platforms, would that be happening? Because I feel like a lot of those people probably wouldn't even know that disease exists. They do now because of, just the way that online is.
Yeah. Yeah, technology and social media and all these things, I've always thought that they don't necessarily create new problems or new crazy ideas. They simply amplify them a lot more. Yeah. And I think that's maybe what we're seeing sometimes with everything in the world, probably.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mark, what you mentioned your day job earlier as you were working on transitioning into Wired to Hunt. What I remember the rumor at the time was, do you remember like the rumblings were like, oh, dude used to work for Google?
Mark works at Google.
Is that true? Is that where you worked before?
That is where I worked, yeah. The rumors were true.
That's funny. And so what did you do for them?
My title was basically an online marketing strategist. So, in short, I worked with online retail companies like Burton Snowboards or Moose Jaw or Tommy Hilfiger, stuff like that, and help them develop marketing strategies using Google's tools like AdWords, YouTube ads, banner ads, that kind of stuff.
So would you be like a what's the term, like a dedicated, like a support person, like they would call you and you guys would communicate, you
like an account
manager type of a thing?
Yeah, so basically would have a portfolio of companies that I was their account manager. Yep. And so, yeah, they could call me if they had issues. And then I was also kind of proactively trying to sell them on using new things, trying new things, spending more money with us, etc. So, yeah, it was kind of miserable at times, but at the same time, I definitely learned a lot that's been helpful in the years since.
Very similar to the interns with Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn, right? When they were working at Google trying to sell local businesses to use Google Maps and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I forgot about that movie, but now that you bring it up, I do think that I remember watching it a long time ago and thinking that, yes, that seems a lot like my first 6 months.
Well, it probably was. I mean, because you're talking about what, pre 2014. So
Yeah.
you know, I mean, think about at that point how businesses were using online. Like today, it's a necessity, right? But 10 plus years ago, like most of those businesses were just figuring out how to create a Facebook page.
Yeah, my very first job there. So this was 2009, I guess. One of the things I had to do was cold call businesses and be like, "Hey, you should be on this Google thing. Why aren't you? You should be buying your search term and making sure that when somebody searches Bob and Julie's used cars, that yours is the first one that shows up." And yeah, it was painful at times, but probably good experience.
Yeah, that's wild, man. That's crazy how far. But I mean, obviously from that kind of mainstream experience, you know, we talk about this industry, you know, oftentimes lacking some of the mainstream business aspect of things. I mean, that's a huge experience vault for you to come and try to integrate into, you know, the passion space, basically.
Yeah, I definitely think that business acumen and understanding just the digital world, all of that stuff that I gained over that 4 years, you know, without a doubt helped me build what I did with Wired to Hunt. And you know, I was fortunate that I was so on fire for this passion project of mine that it didn't feel like work when I was working on it. So I would work, you know, the full daytime, you know, regular job, and then come home and be home by whatever time it was, 5:30 or whatever, and work till 1 a.m. And that was like play. I was just so excited to be building this thing and writing about this stuff and learning about these things and sharing my stories and experiences. So yeah, that was a fun period of life.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, in that early time frame of the Wired to Hunt too, you were kind of also at the same time, we were seeing a lot of still kind of what I would consider like the peak outdoor industry TV aspect of things, right? Where large budgets were going to basically TV shows, and everybody that was on digital at that time, you know, I had plenty of conversations. If you were on YouTube, you know, they were basically like, cool, that's free. Anybody can be on it, right? That the value of that stuff, crazy as it seems, like just they didn't see it.
Yeah, things have come a long way, that's for sure. It's and even when I was working at Google, same thing. Like we were trying to convince major retailers of the same transition that was happening, and people just weren't catching on or were resistant. And folks are always resistant to change in whatever form it comes. But yeah, it's certainly been a major shift now in our world. And I just got lucky that I was you know, well timed, I guess, with when I got into it and was able to kind of take advantage of some of the stuff I knew to share what I love and what I was into and to kind of, you know, after several different steps, get to where I am now, and I can do this full time and get to work on things that I'm really genuinely excited about and make a living.
Yeah. Was there a vision for, you know, what Wired to Hunt would become? I mean, I imagine like us, it just, you know, you're like, I have to just be a part of this community somehow. I've got so much to give and so much passion around hunting and the outdoors that we're just going to do it. We're going to do something. And then for us and for you also, it seemed like it just happened to turn into a podcast. And you're like, great, this is working. This is resonating. I'm gaining traction. Did you have any kind of like a goal? Did you have maybe more foresight than we did in terms of like, hey, I want to build a business with this. I want to eventually monetize it with XYZ. And
yeah. I am one of those annoying, nerdy, very goal-oriented people. So yes, like I'm the nerd who has like 5-year goals and plans and like action items to get you there.
Yeah.
So it has had multiple iterations though, so it's changed over time. I'll give you the very short version of the story as best as I possibly can. But when it started, it just started as like a way to do something hunting related while I was stuck in New York City doing an internship. So I was miserable in New York City, and I was like, I could start a website about deer hunting and kind of feel like I'm sort of back in the world that I love. So that's how it started. And then fast forward like a year and a half later, I take this job with Google, and I'm in San Francisco, or just outside of San Fran, at their headquarters there. And again, I'm miserable. I'm stuck in a place I don't really want to be. And I returned to Wired to Hunt as a way to scratch that itch. Then I read a book that was all about kind of turning your passion into a career. in maybe October of 2009. And I finished that book in like one night, and then decided that night I am going to make a career out of Wired to Hunt, out of this thing. And so at that point, then it was just figuring out, okay, how do I do that? What are the steps that are going to be required?
What was the book?
It's called Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh yeah, Gary V, baby.
Yeah, Gary V. Yeah, this is prior to him being known as Gary V.
Yeah, this is right out of the wine store, Gary V.
Yes, the original, the true OG.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided I'm gonna make a business out of it. But then like the business goals have changed over time. At first, it was just like, can I make a dime from this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And even before that, is like, number one, can I make this a thing that people enjoy and care about and want to tune in to? Can I build a community? So that was number one. Then it was, okay, maybe could I make this into, can I make any kind of money?
Yeah.
And then eventually it was, all right, could I someday turn this into something that could make enough money that I maybe could quit my day job? I was able to do that. And then I just was able to make enough to survive. And then the next thing was, could I make enough, to, not feel like I'm going to lose my house? So these goals kind of slowly grew. And then after that point, like once I got to the point where, okay, I was able to make a living, like a sustainable living, then the next two tiers of goals, I guess, were, number one, it was, I did look at wanting to be like an industry leader.
Yep.
I did want this thing to be like one of the very best in leading voices in our community. And then somewhere in like 2016-ish, in that ballpark, 2016, 17, somewhere in there, my goals started shifting from just, what could I do for myself, to then how do I use my platform, my voice, or Wired to Hunt to make a bigger picture impact. I just had been so positively influenced by deer and other animals and hunting and fishing and the outdoors and public lands and all that kind of stuff, that I started just trying to figure out, what can I give back? How do I do something that actually makes a positive difference? And then that has led to kind of everything I've done in the years since, with, book projects and larger projects with MeatEater and new things I'm working on now. That's been what a lot of my forward focus has been pointed towards, I guess.
HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, we've been using Deer Grow products for a long time. The Plot Start and Plot Boost, more recently Plot Till. Now we've got 3 new liquid fertilizers that have been put in the mix that will cover everything we could want for a food plot program.
It's huge, man. The more food plotting we do, it's like, man, the liquids just make sense. Like whether it's herbicides or the Plot Start and Plot Boost, and now the fertilizers getting mixed in. It's like, man, I can combine all of those in certain cases and do less passes for more results.
I mean, it's all about efficiency. I mean, like you said, less passes. If you're out there treating your beans with glyphosate in the summertime, you can mix in this fertilizer, do that all at once. You have the boost in there to help some metabolism. It's all about efficiency when we're talking about food plots. And really the big difference on these liquid fertilizers is you're bypassing some of these soil limitations, pH limitations, the soil type. In a lot of cases, we talk about dry fertilizers only being available for 17% of what you put down in the first year. These liquid fertilizers straight into the plant are 90% available in the first year. Huge difference in what you're going to see in growth.
It's huge. And so right now you can use code HUNTR15 for 15% off any of the Deer Grow products on their website. And as always,
better food plots, bigger deer.
How did the MeatEater thing come about? And what is forgive me for not knowing, did you sell Wired to Hunt to MeatEater? Was that an asset that they acquired, or what's the relationship there? And you are with MeatEater now full time, that's right?
Yep. So, the way it came about was a total surprise to me. I was doing my thing very happily, running Wired to Hunt on my own, and no interest really in changing that at all. And, I had this kind of shift though that I just mentioned, and that I was trying to figure out, how do I start making a difference? How do I start, becoming a force for good for the future, I guess.
Yep.
And that sounds kind of cheesy.
No, it makes sense, man.
So that's when I developed a book proposal to write this book that I ended up publishing called That Wild Country, which is very kind of advocacy focused. And right around that same time, I got a phone call from Steve Rinella. And kind of out of the blue, like we had talked a handful of times over the years, but definitely didn't have a deep relationship. But he was aware of what I was doing, and I had offered to help out with some stuff for them in the past a little bit. Just hadn't worked out. But he calls out of the blue and is like, "Hey, what are you doing this September?" and I was planning on doing a public land whitetail hunt in Montana. So I said, well, if first week I'm going to Montana, do some deer hunting. He says, well, you're gonna have to cancel it because I think you should come caribou hunting. And I was like, oh, all right. Tell me more. And so he tells me they're doing this Alaskan caribou hunt. And then just kind of as an aside, he's also like, oh yeah, and by the way, I'm doing this whole new big business thing. I really think that you and Wired Hunt should be a part of it, but we can talk about it later. And then he just hangs up. And so that's just kind of how it went.
When was that, Mark, year?
That would have been, oh boy, I think it was summer of 2017.
Okay.
I believe.
So at that point, like MeatEater to the mass public is like just kind of getting going, like fairly known, but not like explosively known.
And it was just the TV show. So it was just the MeatEater TV show. And what Steve was pitching me on was that they were going to expand MeatEater from just a television show to this larger network. And it was going to be not just Steve anymore, but a collection of different voices and people like that. And so
very cool.
He pitched to me, bringing me on board to be one of those people and to kind of merge Wired Hunt into this larger network.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, long story short, that's what happened. MeatEater essentially acquired myself and Wired Hunt into their network. And so ever since then, I've been a full-time employee of MeatEater. I still kind of run Wired Hunt almost like an autonomous kind of like its own little world.
Yeah.
But within that larger umbrella organization and with the support of that team. So
very cool.
That's what's been going on since. Yeah, it's crazy how long it's been now. It seems like it was
just
yesterday.
That's what I say. It's almost 8 years now since that discussion, which is so hard to believe.
That's crazy. You have kids and it all just goes like.
Oh, I know it. Well, I mean, as you kind of, take us into that like kind of moment. So you go in, you have this conversation with Steve, you kind of figure out that being part of this ecosystem and essentially you also buying into this plan of what these guys are going to do. And at that time, still pretty young in this, like all this new medium, right? Like, I mean, if we look at what podcasts are doing in 2017, like there's not a lot in the landscape, like TV's still a big deal pre-COVID at this point. So direct to consumer sales are increasing for outdoor brands, but still retail's driving a lot. Did Steve at the time kind of say, hey, listen, we're also thinking about this brand aspect of things like First Light and product oriented? Was that in the discussion early in the game?
Yes. I mean, it was very early and there weren't a whole lot of people part of it yet. I mean, it was me and Steve and the folks who were investing in the company and Giannis and like one other person.
So Clay wasn't even involved at this point?
Oh yeah, no. Clay wasn't involved for several years after that. So yeah, like the first people who came on board in like my kind of role were myself, and then Giannis was already there. And then Daniel Pruitt came in after that. She's on our culinary side. And then a woman by the name of April Vokey, who does not work with MeatEater anymore, but she did for a while on the fishing side.
Okay.
But yeah, in the beginning, it was just me and Steve, and his wife was involved then, and some folks on the business side. And so we were in those conversations around, all right, what does this look like? What does the future of media look like? How do we build a media platform? And then, there was always this idea, like we wanted the model going into it was aspirational, but it was, let's hopefully build a content to commerce business, which would be, MeatEater already was this thing and Wired Hunt already was this thing. And there was these other things that we were looking at. But if you build that, if we could somehow build a commerce side or acquire a commerce side, then you have this cyclical business model that can kind of grow both sides of the business pie and kind of detach you from some of the obligations that an advertiser supported media model requires.
Yeah. Which was completely different than anything from the hunting side, at least, that was happening at that point. Because at that time, everything was advertiser supported, right? You didn't have a show unless you basically had advertiser dollars funding the show.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we were throwing a lot of things at the wall, and we didn't have a website, we didn't have anything. We were figuring it all out as we went in little conference rooms with like 4 or 5 people in there and a bunch of whiteboards. And it's crazy that it's actually still around now and grown and become something like it is. Because in those early days, it was Just a lot of ideas and hope, I guess.
Yeah. That's a wild, man, to think about. And again, like, we're acting like this is 20 years ago, like it was 8 years ago or less. Like, it wasn't that long ago that these kind of things were happening.
Yeah. It's funny though. You get in it, and it's like a time warp. You just kind of get sucked in, and you're just go, thinking about the next project or the next thing or the next whatever. And you can kind of lose sight that a lot has been accomplished, and you've come a long way, and stuff's real now. It's not just this hypothetical or these these pie in the sky aspirations. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of what we've built and where we're trying to go still, and it's been a fun ride.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess just from your angle, really looking at kind of your background. So you grew up in Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Born and raised. So growing up, deer hunting. I mean, did you hunt other things while you're growing up too? Like kind of the all around aspect of it?
Didn't.
You were just a deer guy.
Just deer. My parent or my dad and family was pretty, I call it domesticated outdoorsman.
Mm-hmm.
We went out to our family deer camp, but it was like a weekend or two a year, and I loved it. But that was kind of it. Nobody turkey hunted or really did anything. Nobody headed out west. There's a little bit of bird hunting.
Yeah.
But very little.
Mm-hmm.
So it was deer and fish.
Yep. And I mean, was your dad a bow hunter, or was it pretty much gun hunting out of the gate?
Gun hunting.
Yep.
When I was like 13 or 14, I wanted to get into bow hunting, and so he bought a bow and kind of learned alongside me.
That's interesting, man. We've heard that from quite a few people that, obviously you look at yourself now and how vested you are right on the deer hunting side. And there's a lot of people that, their dad was a hunter, but, they weren't usually a bow hunter, right? And so it was very much a father-son kind of together exploring, new territory with that.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun kind of evolution for both of us. And looking back now, there's some great stories and moments from us both kind of fumbling our way through it. There wasn't a whole lot of success. We hunted on 3 acres behind my house. That was it. So the opportunity was relatively slim, but definitely some good foundational stuff that once I went off on my own, I was able to build from.
So when you ended up going into these internships in New York and then in California, and I'm curious on a personal level, just because I know when I did it, what was your dad's hunting response like? Was he still out doing that stuff while you were gone? Did you see him kind of pull back a little bit because he didn't have the sidekick with him?
Definitely pulled back. I mean, I don't, there was the weekend or two at deer camp for gun season was something that he would still go do. But bow hunting, I think he'd go out, occasionally here or there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he was really busy with work, and he did a lot. The amount that he did when I was younger was for me.
Yeah.
I think he loves it, but I think he loves the idea of it a little bit more than actually doing it a lot. And I think he enjoys like the social element more. But he's not, and this is not a knock on my dad, we're just different people, but he's just not driven in the way that I have been related to it.
Yeah.
He's just happy to go out there and see some birds and maybe see a deer. And then he'll go out, 3 weeks from now for a couple more times. And he's very happy doing it kind of like that.
Yeah.
Don't you wish you could just be happy doing that sometimes?
Oh, yeah, for
It'd
sure,
be nice
man.
to be like, I'm just happy to see some birds. And
just sitting out here. I saw a deer, it's a good day.
I have to
be
constantly like, it has to be better. I have to go further.
I saw that. I say that because I saw the same thing. Like when I was going to school, Penn State, it wasn't as bad. But like when I went to Mississippi and then eventually lived in Missouri for a while, like I would talk to my dad a lot about hunting, but him actually going decreased pretty rapidly. My mom would always be like, well, like you're not here to basically yank them out with you, is how the conversation would go. And part of me, like I felt guilty about it a little bit because I was still driven, right? Wherever I was, whether it was Missouri or Kentucky, I was going. Like I'd figure out a place to go and hunt, and we'd have those conversations. Oftentimes he was the first person I called if I had a good hunt or I shot something. But you see that of like, as they kind of don't have you there to continue to pull them through. Whereas obviously growing up, like they were the ones yanking your butt out of bed to be like, hey, we're going this morning.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how those roles reverse. I've definitely, at some point, there was that shift where it became me yanking him out of bed and bugging him that he's not ready soon enough or walking too loud out in the woods or something. And yeah, it's pretty funny to see that. And now, with my own kids, they're not quite to that age yet, but I can already see with my oldest, he already thinks he knows it all.
Yeah.
And, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. The kid aspect it's a different ball game, man. Like, people ask me all the time, they're like, all right, well, like, we know how ate up with you are about it. Like, I'm sure your kids are. And like my youngest is like, he lives outside, he'll go, but my oldest just, sometimes he feels like it, sometimes he doesn't, and it's just, I didn't necessarily take them out any different. I didn't really press on them any different to like go out and enjoy it. I think just, you're either kind of bred with it in your brain that this is the lifestyle that you want to embrace, or, it's just part of many things that you like.
That can come with time too, though, I think.
Sure.
Like, dude, I didn't really, like, I wouldn't say I really dug in until, it was after my motocross accident.
Yeah.
Probably. I was bow hunting and stuff, but not, I wasn't like sacrificing in other areas of life as a 12-year-old or 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I loved it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like the only thing. That didn't kind of start to happen until like 14, 15, 16, especially when you get get your first truck.
Got some freedom.
And you can drive to the spot on your own. And, other things kind of fall away too. It seems like doors close. Like for me, it was injury closed the door on sports.
Yep.
And, time becomes more of a priority, and then it whittles down to like, now there's like the one thing, and even the other day, a guy was like, I love trout fishing. I'm like, yeah, I love the idea of trout fishing too. And at one time I loved it, and like, but I'm not going to miss time, planting switchgrass or doing anything related to bow hunting whitetails to go trout fish.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting thought. That's a good point. Like,
so
they definitely
to bring it back to the
grow in
beginning, it can happen in times. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing fine. Mark, I'm curious about your seasons. Like, and maybe it's kind of a loaded question, but like, what did deer hunting look like for you throughout, like, your 20s or whatever, as you were starting, whenever that happened to now? I know MeatEater is like, or has been they're based out of Bozeman, right? So, and it took you on a caribou first to start. So is it still mainly whitetails, or is there a lot of Western incorporation now, or what does that look like?
Yeah. So it's interestingly maybe going to be the opposite of what you're expecting, in that, when I left college and went off on my own, and started wired hunt, very, very diehard whitetail, still has so much to learn. So everything was whitetail nonstop.
Mainly in Michigan, or were you going to other states?
I think I did my first out-of-state trip maybe 2010. So yeah, pretty soon after that, I started venturing out, but definitely the most was in Michigan, and then increasingly branching out to other states every year, a little bit more and more.
Yep.
But I guess around 2013 or 14, somewhere around there is when I did my first non-whitetail hunt, other than turkeys. And so I started doing some Western elk hunts, pronghorn, black bear, Western whitetails. I'm trying to think what I'm missing here, but started doing that, and that kind of increased and
kind
continued
of
with whitetail.
On your own, Mark. You did that on yourself?
Yeah, on my own with buddies.
Okay.
And then when I joined MeatEater, it actually stopped, and I went back to just whitetail because I was kind of
the whitetail guy.
MeatEater was depending on me to produce whitetail content.
Yeah.
They had guys who could do the Western stuff.
Yeah.
But they didn't have someone like me who had that whitetail expertise. So,
you're like, I like to elk hunt. They're like, okay, Mark.
That's cute, but get back there to the Midwest.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've gone almost entirely whitetail since I joined MeatEater, but that is now beginning to switch a little bit. So I'm getting a little bit of diversity back into my season, which is nice. So last year I went to Alaska and did a blacktail hunt, and this year I've got some different stuff that's going to take me to some different places. So a little bit of diversity is appreciated too. But other than that, yeah, I mean, my whitetail season usually starts in September and goes through the beginning of January. And, other than just balancing family stuff, which grows and grows with two young boys, it's a lot of whitetail stuff all over the country.
So what does the plate look like during the season? It's like, are you filming those? Is there a goal of like a production? You're obviously maintaining at least one podcast in the midst of that. I mean, what's the workload kind of look like?
So it's different every year, depending on, the specific stuff we're producing. Like for a couple of years there, I was doing a show called The Back 40 that was all around one specific property in Michigan and all sorts of stuff we were doing to it. Excuse me. So for that year, like I was just there all the time, doing things there, producing and filming and whatnot. Then I've had other years where, and as we're doing now, we're less kind of series specific, and we're more like, hey, go do 5 films anywhere you want, do what you want. And so a little bit more diverse. So over the last couple of years, I've done hunts, Nebraska, Alaska, Michigan, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, different places like that. So yeah, usually I would say, maybe 70% of my hunts are filmed for something with MeatEater, and then there's another maybe 25 to 30% that is a little bit of my own time still hunting. But that's still, that it's still content. It's still, related to work, and that I'm producing social media around it, or talking about it on podcasts, or writing about it. So it all kind of filters into what I do for work in one way or another. But yeah, a lot of the video stuff, that's a big kind of time taker during the fall, because you're not just hunting. There's a ton of time, at least for like the kind of films that we do. There's a lot of pre and post work developing kind of story structures and notes, and looking for larger narratives. It's not like what I used to do before MeatEater, where I would just hunt and just film whatever happened, and it was what it was. With a lot of our stuff, there's bigger stories and kind of planned out structures, and so that requires just like a different level of preparation. And when I'm actually out there hunting, I'm not just hunting. I also have this like parallel kind of wavelength through which I'm constantly thinking about, all right, did I cover this? Did we talk about this issue? Did we discuss this? Did I explain this well enough? Have I made a point to connect us from this last scene to this new scene? Are people going to be able to connect the dots between what I was doing yesterday to what I'm doing today, to this larger storyline that we have revolving in this narrative or this film or whatever it is? So yeah, it's a strange new world of hunting for me now, because there's kind of two competing things in my brain at all times. So it makes it different.
I know we talked pre-podcast about you guys having your cabin out in Idaho, and I know you're doing some public hunting too. Do you own land in Michigan still?
I don't own like hunting land in Michigan, other than my family's deer camp. So my grandma technically owns the 40 acres up in northern Michigan with our cabin. I own a 2-acre yard and a house. And then I do have a cabin out in Idaho, but that again is 2 acres of a yard there.
So no like deer hunting property owned.
Don't own any deer hunting property. I'm very lucky in that I have a property that I can do some management on that I don't own, but I have permission to do some work on, and have been able to, work on that piece of property now on a permission basis, for almost 15 years now. So that's been really nice for me to be able to like try a lot of these land management things on a small scale, at least dabble, I guess, and get that experience and reap some of the benefits of that, even though I don't own land. So that's been great. And then that Back 40 project, again, I didn't personally own it, but MeatEater owned it for 2.5 years or something like that. And so that was a great opportunity again to learn about that side of things.
How did that go, Mark? You're like, hey, we got this idea for this series. They're like, Mark, we want you to kind of lead it. And they're like, here's the budget. Show us what farm you want to buy.
So it was more so like I came to them and said, hey, here's this idea. We should buy a farm.
It's a great idea.
Great idea. We're in.
Here's the idea. You should put it under my name. Yeah.
Exactly. We should buy a farm. You should let me go find it.
And when I say we, Steve, I mean you, right?
And then, it was to document everything and all of my kind of lessons learned along the way and all these different things. And it kind of grew and grew from the original idea. But yeah, it started out not with a budget really, but just like, hey, they wanted me to basically identify what I would need to do this kind of project in a way that would, achieve the goals we had, but also be like relatable and then also not crazy expensive.
Sure.
And so I just went out and started canvassing the area, trying to find something that I thought had the building blocks that I would need. And then kind of figured out what that budget range was. And then I came back and said, hey, I think like if we can get something like 40 to 60-ish acres, I bet you that's something we could work with. That's going to cost X dollars to X dollars around here. Does that sound like something we can do? And they gave me the green light on that general idea. And then I went and really started, shopping hard for that. And then got really lucky and found kind of a really ideal piece that was undervalued. And we were able to get it at a pretty good price. So
that's cool.
That's how that
and they sold it eventually at the end.
We didn't sell it. We gave it to the National Deer Association.
No shit.
It to them
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So we gave it to them to be used as a new hunter education space.
Wow.
Very
cool.
Yeah, in the last, I don't know, it was like 4 years ago now or something, we've been hosting, and I continue to go back and help mentor new hunters out there with their Field to Fork program. And so there's NDA volunteers that have been continuing the land management that I started there, and then bring out new hunters and teach them about the land and teach them about the projects, and then also teach them to hunt. And then we go back out for hunts in September and December, actually with these people, showing them how to do it, mentoring them, helping them track the deer, gut the deer, butcher the deer, all the good stuff.
Wow.
So that's been a very cool kind of full circle story.
Yeah, that's huge, man. I mean, to think of, people having access to like a legitimate piece of property that has had the management done, they can see firsthand, they can experience the hunt, clear to, the actual processing aspect of it. I mean, it's not an easy thing anymore with just the way that hunting and land has become from leasing to owning. Most new hunters struggle a lot trying to find a place to go.
Yeah, that's what we've heard from a lot of the people that came through that program is, some of them had tried on their own on public land, and they just never, there were so few deer encounters and actual opportunities that they just couldn't learn a lot of the stuff that you never get to even think about until you start to actually see deer or see real deer sign and have to make decisions based on it, or make decisions in the moment when you see deer approaching, or read deer body language and all that kind of stuff. Like there's a guy who's a friend of mine now who spoke about this a lot, and just how, his learning, it was like a hockey stick once he came to that property. He seemed like he was just like hitting blanks every time he go out in public land and never really learning anything new. And then he came out to the back 40 with us, and all of a sudden it was like boom, boom, boom. He learned 4 years worth of knowledge in one fall.
Yeah. Well, and not just the property. I mean, what you're saying is absolutely true, but also to be able to do it with somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah,
it's like a mentor. It's like
versus just like kind of floundering out there of like, I don't, frankly, figure it out yourself.
Yeah, and I don't know that it ever happened like to the level that it happens now. So I mean, I would say it's one area that we are improving in. Maybe it's like even I had influence, and my uncle was, I would say, taught me the most in terms of like, here's how I hang my tree stand. That was a big part of it. Here's what I'm looking for, just basic setup stuff. But he never once sat in a tree stand with me, like,
to guide you
until I was 20 something. And it was more just like hey, it's fun to do together at that point. Unlike, with Corey, who's in the other room over there, it's like, dude, from day one, I was like in the stand over his shoulder. We had a year or two there where we hadn't got that far yet, but I think there's like way better instruction that you can get now. And even like whether you're saddle hunting or you get these hang on tree stands to be able to pack people in a tree and hunt together now and stuff. It's the learning curve can be like pretty fast.
Yeah.
Pretty fast.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Lone Wolf Custom Gear.
Man, Jared, we are tree stand fanatics, and I think the one thing that we have learned over all these years is to kill big bucks, we got to be mobile. We've been hunting out of Lone Wolves for many years, the original Lone Wolf, and then obviously with the custom gear stuff, we're using the .5 and the .75. Yeah. And the one thing that we talked about is like, what if there were no cables? Here we are.
I really just don't know how you can beat it, frankly. But, a lot of that came too from a relationship that we've built with the DeQuistos. We've had both Cody and Andre on the podcast a few times. The passion for hunting, the outlook on the sport and stuff, I think is eye to eye with how we look at it. Everything that has gone into building this brand and to building these tree stands is something that we want to be a part of.
This is the 40th anniversary of these guys creating tree stands that have been critical to how we hunt whitetail deer today. If you look over the past, you'll see Andre's designs being implemented across so many stands over the years. Such a cool thing, but really has changed the way that we all hunt whitetail deer from above now.
Right now, you can use code HUNTR, HUNTR, to get 7% off anything on the entire website. Be the lone wolf. Well, dude, I imagine not every thing goes like the back 40. We're like, hey, here's this idea, Meter, can we contribute to get this piece of property? So just generally speaking, like when you have a season ahead of you, it's like the 2025 season, it's like, what are you looking for in terms of like an opportunity or a piece of property, or like what are you looking for in terms of places to go hunt?
Like just, to create like a media project, or just to actually go hunt?
Just to go hunt, or both. Yeah.
I guess that's a great question. There's like the places that I've always hunted or that I have a long-term, history with that are just kind of givens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like there's the
mainly
places that I always hunt.
Mainly permission stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's my permission stuff in Southern Michigan, and that I can depend on that and that I have history on. So planning on doing those kinds of things. Then, every year I'm trying to pick up new permission because inevitably you always lose stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like 2-3 years ago, I was very excited because I picked up this 100-acre property that I got permission on that I thought I'd have access to for a while and seemed really high potential, and got my hopes too buried up in it. And then, of course, 1 year later, that's gone. You're back to square one. So I try not to get too attached to anything because it seems like everything's fleeting. And so every year I try to force myself to go pound the pavement again, or just start asking people and see what you can uncover. Man, some years I've had had money to get a lease, or saved money to get a lease, or try to get, work dollars attributed to something like that.
Yeah.
And that's always harder to get than I would think.
Yeah.
At least to find something of quality.
Yeah. I mean, last year I tried hard to find a lease, and
it's
nothing
hard.
came up that would actually make sense for me or for us. So nothing like that panned out. So yeah, so every year there's a lot of wild cards. So this year I don't have a lot of stuff locked in and figured out yet. I've got my local Michigan stuff. I know I want to go do my deer camp stuff.
Yep.
A time or two with my family. I should be drawing Iowa this year. And so I do have some good buddies that live out there that I've hunted with every year I draw.
Cool.
So I can depend on that. And so that's something I'm planning on. And then
there you go.
Like
That's
a big
stuff.
Yeah, that is a big one.
Yeah.
And then there's like some places that I've developed kind of out of state soft permissions that, I got to check back in every time you draw, or every time you can go to that given state and see if they still have a place for you. But there's a couple places like in Nebraska and elsewhere where that might happen this year. But still TBD.
Isn't that fun, dude? It's such a, I feel like we're in a constant pursuit of access, and it's all of the above. It's like, are we going to buy a farm? Are we going to lease a farm? Are we going to get permission? Are we going to make our family farm better? And it's like, the answer is all of the above as much as possible. It's like you want to do everything that you can, but I was curious, in your position, what that looked like, if it was mainly permission, which it sounds like a lot of it is, or, if you have, considered buying a farm, or, it sounds like you've at least leased a farm or done some of that,
Yeah. I've definitely thought about buying a farm many times. And I would say the biggest thing keeping me from doing that, honestly, has been the fact that we own a cabin out in Idaho, and we spend big chunks of time out there, and we're always thinking about like, what's our long-term future look like, and where are we going to be? And, I don't know. So every year I'm like, I should buy a farm. And then I'm like, well, I don't know what we're doing with our life, or we've got this other place out there. And is that smart to do this too? So for a number of years I've kind of been up in the air on that front.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. And then I've had some leases in the past. I had a really nice little lease with a buddy down in Ohio for a number of years. That was great. It was, like 90 acres that the two of us shared, and it was just big enough that the two of us could have fun. And that was terrific. But that, they sold that and have not been able to find like a good long-term thing since.
Well, we don't have the answer for I don't know if we've ever come across a good lease. Maybe
it's been local connections.
Yeah,
not on market, I should say.
What's the ratio? I would say how many properties have we leased over the years? 15, 20?
Mm-hmm.
1
to 2
or 2 of them were pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And they were in the known states. It's
Kansas.
You got to be in the right right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were in Kansas.
Yes.
They're in Kansas.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
So I don't know. That's tough. Frankly, I've never recommended to anybody. There are even people that ask, they're like, should I get a lease? And I'm like, it seems like a good way to spend a lot of money and maybe not find what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying no, but if you can find the right one, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, access. Like you said, Jared, it can be fun in that every year you're thinking about, do I want to do this or this, and what new thing might be in store? It can also be stressful.
Yeah,
I definitely, every year come into it, I'm like, geez, I need to find something more. I need more options, and it never seems to be exactly what you want. And I've, I've not thrown money at it, and maybe I should put more money towards it as an investment. I guess that would be smart. But
in your position,
been a little bit,
in your position, it could go either way. It's like even the back 40, for MeatEater, that's like the best write-off of all time. So you can get a property and then donate it.
Yeah.
Or, so you can buy a piece of property, but from a business standpoint, it's like, you may be just as well off with a lease in that case, so where there's less obligation to like have an output. It's like, hey, we have to spend the money anyways from a tax write-off standpoint. So
the leasing tax write-off thing was because we did it. I don't remember which year. We had a business project year where we were like, hey, you get to the end of the year, you're like, you're either going to give this to Uncle Sam or you got to spend it, which I hate that scenario. And there was a year that I think we leased like, I don't know, maybe 5 properties.
We balled out. That's where Jeremy was MeatEater in that case. And he's like, what properties do you want? And I was just like, here you go.
And I won't say that it was like the worst money we ever spent, because the alternative was like buying stupid things or like going in taxes. But like what we received from a quality standpoint, we utilized. We went and hunted them, but they were not good.
Well, you know what? I would give similar advice to somebody looking to lease a piece of property as to somebody that's looking to buy a farm. Purely from like, if your goal is to kill world-class whitetails, it's like you're not going to find it on market. You're not going to find a lease on base camp leasing that has. Yeah. And I'm not saying never. You know what I mean? But just like
rarely,
just in the same way, and if you are, you're going to pay a premium for it. You know what I mean? There's a reason that it's on market. And you're seeing it.
Yeah. The price
Probably
per acre.
Mm-hmm. The best advice I ever got, and I don't know who I would have got this from, but maybe I should frame it as the best lesson I ever learned, was that you should just constantly have access on your mind and a part of your conversations.
Exactly.
If that is always happening, whether it be with your grandpa or someone you met at the local diner or some new business contact or someone you happen to have next to you at the bar or whatever it is, you never know when those contacts and that network building leads to something. That almost always seems to be the best route to access, rather than trying to spend a ton of money on something on the market, like you said.
Yeah. Yep. I was just talking about it with Jeremy this morning. It's like, dude, you can live for a year. Some people at your entire life, it's like just the perception is reality. It's like, well, I just have access to this one farm. And some people will say like, well, what if I could get, more act? What if I get more permission? And you can change it that quick. Like a conversation can get you access to hundreds of acres, and you might have to spend $0. Like there's fewer and fewer opportunities for that. But that's like, what better rush is there than getting permission on a big farm? That's, and it may not be there forever. You want to keep the gears turning and irons in the fire, but it is possible. Like they're out there.
Yeah. I think you just have to get very comfortable with rejection.
Yep.
And this is something that has been hard for me, but I've gotten better at it. Like going into any conversation in the past, I might be afraid to ask, if there might be permission on a property or something, whether it be a knock on the door scenario or just some farmer I'm talking to.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it can be terrifying, right? But you eventually learn that, number one, the answer right now is no.
That's right.
Already, until you ask.
That's right.
And then number two, the worst that's going to happen is that they're just going to confirm that. It's already taken, or no thanks, or no, you're not going to die. So yeah, Probably. It's so funny how like there's been situations where there's been people I've known for years and have known that they have some land maybe, but just didn't want to bother them, or didn't want to, be pushy or whatever. Just assumed that they probably already hunted there, or that other people did. And then, finally I tried, and oh yeah, sure, go for it. Here's this farm and this farm. And, lo and behold, there've been years of opportunity that I had just been too, not willing to stretch myself a little bit.
That's right.
That's tough, man. It definitely, the fear of rejection is something that most people cannot get over. And it doesn't help that, nowadays, and I'm guilty of it, like somebody random shows up at my door and I'm not there to reach a hand out and shake it. Usually I'm like, what the hell are you doing here type of response. Cause it's just, it's not the norm anymore.
Well, you gotta get your pitch down, and you gotta have a reason to be there. You can't just show up in some random state with no reason. Hey, I'm Jared from Pennsylvania. Can I hunt here? It's you gotta establish some sort of connection. There's got to be, and you can get creative with it. There's ways to find out what people are doing with the property. Whether they're leasing it, other people, and that maybe just be time. Maybe you drive past it during season and see a truck parked there. Then.
Helps to have a contact that you can at least refer to, of like, oh, well, hey, so-and-so said you had some property over here. I just want to know. Yeah. At least you're tying it back locally.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Worse.
I mean, one of the best.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say one of the best little tricks that I picked up over the years was, anytime I was out, trying to get permission, like I would do this in Iowa and Illinois and different states, Ohio a lot, where I would just show up for a day or a weekend and knock on doors. And one of the things that worked the very best was that every time that I would get a no, I would always ask that person, the next thing I'd ask is there anybody else in the neighborhood who you think might be worth talking to? And almost always they'd point you to someone, and then you go to that house, and then you can say, hey, Bob down the street said you might be worth talking to about this. And right away you've got this connection, and it seems like you're,
that rascal would tell you to come down.
They're like,
here.
No, but you can go to Bob's place.
Hey, use my access to get to Bob's place if you want.
That's it. Like, it's like worst case scenario. Even if you get the no's, it's like, everybody now.
Yeah.
You can go and establish yourself like in this thing. And, the most important thing, this is just like sales in general, is like, you don't want to like be like, all right, well then F you, off your, you don't want to leave it on a bad foot. You always just say, hey, no problem. It's just great to meet you, and like, maybe I'll see you around type of a thing. And people do come around, it may take 2, 3, 4 years, but dude, look how fast freaking time flies.
Yeah.
And if you've put in that effort, it really just means just being a better person, be involved in your community. And eventually some of those no's inevitably will turn into opportunities.
Yeah. So true.
Well, Mark, I think that you guys as a platform are probably more tied in than I would say anyone else from kind of what's happening on the landscape level side of things. And we talked about, even with the example of the back 40 there, a lot of these new hunters having discouraging experiences on public, not in all cases, but in a lot of them. What are you guys seeing or talking about on your level on things that, essentially, where are they going, basically? Like, what are, we talked about the access thing that continues to be obviously in the whitetail space, but also, with more and more chatter on, are they going to sell federal lands at the federal level to fund this kind of sovereign fund? What's going to happen there? That could decrease solar taken into some of these lands. Like, I would assume that you guys are pretty in tune with a lot of that stuff right now and coming across your desk.
Sure. So there's a lot there. And I would just say that, public lands absolutely are probably more important than ever, in that, access is just a greater challenge for any and all hunters out there, but especially whitetail deer hunters, as we're discussing. I think even though there might be fewer licensed hunters than there were some number of years ago, I think that the number of days hunted, like the level of dedication of hunters today, is significantly
way
more
higher
than it was a number of years, right?
Absolutely.
And not only that, but you definitely have more people trying to get more access. So there's a lot of folks like us out there who are all trying to get places to hunt, and who, when we finally do, we're putting in a lot of time and energy and money into it. So yeah, especially for newer hunters who don't have the time and experience that folks like us have, it's getting hard to find places to go. So yeah, public lands, really important. Most new hunters, that's what they are depending on. That's where most of these people are getting their start. And then there's still plenty of other people out there who are experienced hunters and outdoors people who that's their place too. And so we're super lucky here in America. We have 840 million acres of public land accessible in America. 200 million acres of those are state or county level public lands, and then 640-ish million acres are federal public lands. So that's pretty great that we have that opportunity. We're relatively unique across the world, and that idea came around at a time when we could still, when there were places still able to be saved. So
Mark, not to interrupt, but just I'm curious about that statistic, and I don't expect you to know this necessarily, but do you have any idea how much of that, whatever it is, 800 million acres is east of, I don't know, where would you draw the line in terms of looking at like the Midwest,
from like a whitetail
demographic?
Yeah, it'd be east of like Nebraska, Kansas, like the Great Plains and east.
Yeah. I don't know the actual number, but the vast majority is west of the Mississippi. If I had to put a guess on it, I would probably say 20% maybe is east of the Mississippi, 30% east of the Mississippi. Because you're looking at, west of the Mississippi and then up into Alaska.
Alaska's got to have huge percentage,
hundreds of millions of acres up in those places. But there is significant places here still in the east. I mean,
I'm just doing some fun math here. I mean, 20% of 800 million is what we said.
160 million.
It's still 160 million.
Yeah. So there's plenty of places, even in states like Iowa that have one of the smallest percentages of public lands in the nation. There's still lots of great county hunting areas that you can go to that I've explored and been on. Here in Michigan, I'm in the southern part of the state. I'm pretty darn far from any national forest or big chunk of land.
But
I've still got state and county level things here that I can take advantage of. So yeah, I'm very thankful that those opportunities are there. I love it when I'm out west though, and there's big pieces of public land and lots of those opportunities that really open things up. So yeah, I think I would just kind of high level say that this stuff's, very important to hunters because a lot of people need places to go. It of course is important for all sorts of other activities that many of us enjoy, like fishing, camping, hiking, backpacking, whatever it is. There's a $1 trillion economy built on outdoor recreation now. That's the latest number. A little over $1 trillion a year of economic impact from the outdoor recreation economy, and public lands, are really the backbone of a lot of that. So big business, important for our nation's economy. And then there's all the ecosystem services that these places provide. It's interesting. A lot of people don't realize that one of the major reasons that the National Forest System was created was to protect the headwaters of all of the major watersheds that would provide clean drinking water for our nation. And so that's a huge thing that these state forests and national forests provide, let alone, of course, sustainable resources and timber, minerals, gas and oil. All those kinds of things are part of the equation. And then, of course, the things we care about, especially being hunters, great opportunities for fish and wildlife and a lot of the good stuff in life. So yeah, they're important. We're very lucky in America to have that kind of thing. And yes, you mentioned, there are threats to them. There always have been threats to them. There's constantly this kind of ebb and flow. Some people have priorities in which they would rather sell them off or squeeze every nickel and dime out of them as they can. And then the other side wants to protect and don't touch them at all. And, we kind of swing between those two. And this last book that I wrote was exploring the history of that. And so I, kind of learned as I worked on that book that these fights have been going on kind of similarly. The details are different every 10 to 20 years or whatever, but there's always something, and it's likely to continue no matter who's in office or what party or whatever. Probably 50 years from now, there's going to be some new version of this going on.
Yeah.
And that's just part of the bargain, I guess. When you have public lands like this, there's going to be, the unique great thing about them is that our nation's public lands are owned by all of us, right? They're our national inheritance. We have access to them, and as citizens of America, ownership in them. But the challenge in that is that with all of these different owners of the same piece of land, there's a lot of different ideas about what should be done with it. And so that leads to challenges. So there's good things and bad things that come with that. I think where MeatEater stands and where I stand is that given all of that, it just requires that we as owners of this landscape be engaged in what's happening with it and paying attention to it and standing up for the things that we care about and would like to see happen there.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point, man. I think we often, because we're hunters or fishermen, like we see kind of that surface level, no pun intended, but the surface level value of the resources. And, like Jared and I were looking at some statistics here in Pennsylvania from a game lands level, right? From a state-owned level. And it's like, the Game Commission makes, I don't know what it was, 17% or so of their revenue, and it's somewhere in the 20s of millions of dollars from license fees. They make almost $96 million from oil and gas revenue underneath the state game lands. And so, the value of the game lands to the hunting and fishing public is extremely valuable, right? And for people who are camping and hiking. But, the subsurface and, in some cases, timber rights are giant values for that state to continue to fund to do other things for conservation. And so understanding that and, yes, there's a sensitivity around the hunter numbers and stuff, but understanding where that money is really coming from, and listening now, we're hearing like other departments of the state are like, well, we need some of that money, right? And it should be falling into a game fund, right, for conservation. But all of a sudden they're like, well, that's a lot of money coming in from these state-owned lands. And so if you're not aware of that stuff, those things happen, and all of a sudden that game fund that should be going to improving the quality of lands or acquiring more public land goes to other departments, because you weren't paying attention to it, essentially.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing, is just if you were going to use these places, or, even just as a hunter, if you're going to use the wildlife of your state, right? You're going to hunt, you're going to take some of this stuff. It's kind of on you to pay attention, to be engaged, to be aware of what's going on, and to make sure your voice or your community's voice is heard on this stuff. Because if we don't do it, there's not going to be anybody else who's advocating for the interest of hunters or the interest of public land users, right? Because to your point, there's other people who want these dollars or who want these resources and who maybe don't have the same aims or long-term focus that we do. So I think it just requires, it's a bummer, because I'd love to just hunt and fish and just have a bunch of fun and never think about this stuff. But I think that these days you kind of almost have to. We used to say that just by buying a hunting license, you're a conservationist, right? Like all hunters are conservationists. We bought a license, checked the box. Yep. Some dollars went to the fund, and you're good. I think these days that's probably not enough. I think there's probably there has to be another little checkbox next to that says you also need to, pay attention to what's actually happening, advocate for, management of deer or the public lands or whatever the thing is that you really care about or understand. I think hunters have also got to start to be a little bit more engaged in that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. And that's the tough part, because, historically, and even growing up, like, these issues from a political front were just unrecognized. Probably. I'm sure they were happening, right? They weren't recognized. They weren't publicized. And so, it was probably, I don't know, into my 20s, right? So you're saying 15 to 20 years ago, before I wrote my first, U.S. House or State House rep or whoever it was on an issue. And even today, there's several of these issues that are flying around out there. And if you would ask probably, I'd say at least 8 out of 10 hunters, like, hey, have you ever wrote your rep about this stuff? They probably think that they need to be writing the DNR or the Game Commission or whoever. They don't understand that, like, a lot of this stuff is happening at the legislative level, and therefore their local rep is the one that they need to contact, because that's where the decision is going to happen. And I try to, if there's something that I try to educate people all the time on, it's that, yes, there is a lot of things in the DNR or Game Commission or whoever's control, but most of it is at the legislative level. And so when you get mad, like a guy just the other day was like just ranting on the Wisconsin DNR about the wolf issue. And I said, dude, it's not their issue. I said, talk to the feds, right? Like they can't do anything. They cannot do anything. They cannot make a wolf season. They are not preventing you from having a wolf season. But they have no idea. They have no idea that is a federal level issue and not the DNR screwing them out of something. It's tough.
Yeah, it's a two-part equation. Like, and none of us have enough time for all of it, right? That's the challenge. But trying to find some ways to get as educated as possible on this stuff, and one of the easiest ways is just to find the conservation organization or two that resonates with you the best, and at least sign up for those newsletters so you can get some of these updates when they come out, and find the places where you can take some action, press the right buttons, reach out to the right people. But yeah, it's not as hard as it looks, or maybe as some people think. I remember early on, I was intimidated by the idea of calling a congressman or sending a letter to someone. But once you do it a time or two, you realize there's not much to it. Even making one of these phone calls. I remember the first time I called a congressman, I was worried. Like I was preparing myself for a debate. I thought that there was going to be someone who picked up on the other side of the line, and they were going to argue with me on it and question my data points and all that kind of stuff. And instead, it was just some poor little intern who was afraid of me and had to just listen to everything I had to say and write it down and report it back to his boss. So that stuff's not that hard to do, and it all adds up.
Yeah, and I mean, even like there's a House bill in Kentucky right now around CWD, transport of carcasses, and things like that.
I just saw that.
Yep. And so I'm not a resident of Kentucky, but I own several properties there. And so I wrote the local rep and I said, hey, listen, out of the gate, not a resident, right? Not a voting, but I own several properties. I pay property taxes. I contribute to the economy there. Here's my stance on it. And, as a non-voting Kentuckian, take it with a grain of salt, basically. And he wrote me back and he said, hey, I take you're a landowner here. That's a resource that you're actively working with and involved with. He's like, I look at this as just as you were living in Kentucky, basically. Not saying that all of them are going to be that way, right? But he was. And all I did was just go onto his webpage and just take 2 sentences to it or 3 sentences and ship it off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that each and every one of us can do. And I think it's unfortunately a sign of the times that we just kind of have to.
Yeah. I would love to see more people be less keyboard warriors and more participant in that. And I'm not saying discourage them from being like you can do that. At the same time, just make sure that your voice is being heard where it matters, because it doesn't matter on Instagram. Like, great, it's there. Right,
you're not gonna make much of a difference in the comments section.
You're not.
Use those same keystrokes on the keypad and send it to someone who can do something.
Yeah, and I mean, again, kind of going back to like the permission thing. Like the worst that's gonna happen, these people are just gonna ignore you and you won't hear anything back. Right? It doesn't matter. Yeah. You at least put your piece in there and you said what you meant, and we talk about it all the time. Like when we're talking about these wildlife, minus the migratory species, those are owned by the people of that state, right? And so they should have the decision-making power to say, like, this is what we want, this is how we feel. And the only way that's going to happen is by making those, inputs essentially to the legislative branch in your area.
Oh, yeah. And, people have been able to make the connection to public lands because of that. Like, it's pretty clear, like, public lands are owned by the people, and people get pretty fired up about that once they understand things, and there's been a strong degree of engagement there. But I think that, to your point, there could be the exact same argument made for public wildlife, because to your point,
absolutely,
these wildlife populations are owned and managed in the trust of the people, and so we should be just as engaged and thinking about this across our states too on the wildlife management side. So yeah, there's this saying that I heard once and that has just stuck with me. That's the greatest cure for depression is action. And so, not saying actual technical depression, but just like if you're frustrated by what's happening with your state or with public lands or with anything related to the stuff we're talking about, I can guarantee you that actually taking some kind of action that could make a difference, like calling your senator or talking to the commission or whatever it is, actually taking real action, even if, like you said, Jeremy, maybe they don't do what you want, maybe they ignore you, but you can go to sleep at night a whole lot more comfortably knowing that you did something and that you tried.
Yeah.
And that's going to feel a heck of a lot better than just, road raging on someone on Instagram.
Oh, I agree, man. I agree.
Do you know, I mean, I'm just like toiling on the why I might not be inclined to do that. I'm not keyboard warrioring, but I'm not calling my congressman either. And I mean, to me, it's probably out of like disbelief that it could make a difference.
It sure is not going to make a difference if you don't call.
Well, I know. But the alternative in my mind is like, well, I'm going to put that effort into buying my own piece of private land, which doesn't help our public conversation here necessarily. Sure. I'm not going to leave the future of my deer hunting in the fate of a politician.
If we're talking about like the herd level stuff, like, if you don't do anything there, like your private land's not going to prevent that. They're going to walk across the property and whatever's going to happen over there with your neighbor.
No doubt. It would affect it at that level. So I say that not to push back on what you guys are talking about, but like just trying to root out what would inspire somebody is like, is there evidence or proof of like a trackable difference that was made by
you can see the
that
vote.
Effort that you guys are talking about?
You can see the vote for that rep.
Yeah, voted.
That's what I looked at.
The representative
to see which way that they voted, and once I see that, like, there's oftentimes I'll respond back to that and say, "Hey, saw you voted this way, which maybe wasn't what," and I just wonder why. And some of them will respond to you.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, and I think I would just say that, if you look at how these people are incentivized, if we're looking at our congressmen and women and senators, when it comes right down to it, they are incentivized by keeping their job. They want to stay in office so they can collect a paycheck and maintain their position of power or whatever it is. And so a lot of the decisions they're making are around whether or not this decision or this particular thing they'll support or not support will help them stick around. So I think that oftentimes the biggest lever of power we have is simply changing the temperature. It's like lighting a fire underneath their asses, letting them know, hey, there's a lot of people that will not be happy with you for this one that could influence your future job security. And there are examples, relatively recent examples of that actually happening related to these very issues. For example, back in 2019 or somewhere around there, 2019, 2020, there was this whole movement over the mid-teens of the 2014, 15, 16, 17, around this idea of transferring federal public lands to states. There's a bunch of people that said, hey, the federal government shouldn't own public lands. Give it to the states. They can manage it better. Or just transfer it off. This shouldn't be a thing that the government does. And that, there's a whole bunch of energy around that from some folks, and then a very strong pushback from folks in the hunting and recreation space because of a long litany of reasons why that would likely lead to these places, probably being either seriously,
declining,
degraded, I guess, degraded and or just sold off.
Yeah.
So two things. One, there was a specific bill that proposed about 3 million-ish acres to be sold off. That very specific bill got a lot of attention from our community and like the general outdoor rec community, and a whole bunch of people did what we're talking about. And within like a week, that congressman felt this land tremor across the country and within his state and realized he was going to get booted right out of office if he kept this going forward. He immediately had to pull it back off the table and apologize and say he would never do something like that again, right?
Yeah.
A few years later, there was a number of senators up for re-election that really needed a win, and they recognized that the public land issue was so important in their states of Montana and Colorado that they had to get folks to get this bill passed. They had to get the president to sign this bill and to say he supported it. They had to win on public lands. Everybody else in their party was not doing this kind of stuff or supporting this bill, but they needed a win because of the fact that hunters and anglers and other folks in the outdoor rec community bugged them so dang much and said this actually mattered to their vote. And that led to a couple of these senators supporting this bill that got passed and signed by the president, that it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for people saying this matters, this matters, this matters. So it's not going to happen every time, but it certainly can.
Yep.
Those are good examples.
I know we got to let you go here. But one thing that I was going to say too on that point is some of these smaller state level things, there's been ones that I've contacted, even like local PA guys, that nobody else has reached out to them. Like it's literally, they're like, hey, we've never even looked at this yet. We're going to take a look at it. You're the first one that's brought it to our attention. Mm-hmm. So like you may be the only one. And if you say, hey, I really feel strongly, and you have good reasoning to back it up, they may be like, okay, well, like that's the only person that's really said anything. That could sway their opinion completely one way or another. Because that's the thing. At the end of the day, and it's no disrespect to them, most of them have no opinion on what is in front of them.
Right.
They're just waiting for somebody to lean them one way or the other.
Right.
That's
exactly.
it. So
that's a huge service we can provide. Is help educate some of these folks on this stuff.
Yep. I agree, man. Well, cool, Mark. Well, we know we got to let you go. You got to jump on another pod, but we appreciate you coming on, and a lot of things to continue to unravel here. So we'll get you back on here at some point in the near future and continue that discussion. But we appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you guys. I enjoyed it, and happy to join you anytime again in the future.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Better Backstrap.
Well, one thing that's undeniable, man, is you and I both like to eat. And so we're going to be partnering with the Better Backstrap this year to have the best seasonings possible for our meat this summer.
Yeah. Well, dude, when it comes to venison, it's like you've heard me talk about before. It's like, what does the preparation for all this look like and stuff? And it's like, I really want to make a point of eating more venison moving forward. And some of the Better Backstrap mixtures have made it super easy.
Yeah. And so we've got kind of 3 core mixtures. You've got your original Better Backstrap, which is for that grilling of your backstrap or tenderloins or anything like that. You've got your classic taco mix.
Can't go wrong with tacos.
Can't go wrong with that. And then you've got your standard SPG in the orange can.
Well, SPG and down the hatch.
There you go. So right now, if you go to betterbackstrap.com, you can use the code HUNTR15 to get 15% off any of your orders on the seasonings, and there'll probably be more coming out here throughout the year.
Get yourself a Better Backstrap.
So we know that was kind of short and sweet. Mark had to finish off one. He had a technical error come up, so he had to be able to knock that out right after this one. So we only had him for about an hour and a half there, but it was a good one to get on. I haven't talked to Mark in a while. It's been several years probably since I was on Wired to Hunt. So good to catch up and really cool to kind of hear the kind of chronology of events there from, starting and then the MeatEater stuff and how that all kind of came into happening. Cause that's one that, you see happen even here recently. Like the Element guys I know are over there now on their side on the MeatEater end of things. And, so you've seen them kind of build this platform and these personalities out more and more. So I'd always wondered how, if it was like an acquisition or a merger or he just went to work for them or however that worked. So
yeah,
it was kind of cool to hear on that stuff. And yeah, those guys are really tied in on the advocacy front, which is cool. Like that's definitely a different position for them. I mean that, we've talked about Branella's side, like I think the MeatEater podcast in itself, besides like the story aspect, is very things that are happening, advocacy, laws, legislation, bills, like just because of the broader effects across the board, that just tends to seem to be what like the MeatEater podcast is like. Where obviously Mark on the Wired to Hunt side is very deer hunting management focused.
Yeah. Well, I can remember, tuning in for Wired to Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been a big consumer of MeatEater. I guess, and I don't know why. I guess I just always was under the assumption that it was more of a Western.
Yeah, it's probably the relatability. I mean, it is a lot of Western stuff. It is a lot of
It's also very like oriented towards, I would say, non-hunter. It's like a mainstream, right?
I mean, no. I mean, their bigger audience is outdoor hunters. Like that's
yeah. Is it?
Oh yeah. It is.
I don't know if that's the intention though. I mean, I'm not trying to like.
Sure. I think the show was to.
That's what I mean.
Increase the.
Viewership.
Yeah, it was like it was like a edgier mountain man type of thing.
Right. And that's what I mean. Like even now,
but the podcast is not.
No. I'm talking about the show initially, and I think even now, like I think a lot of Branella's stuff is like Nat Geo type stuff. It's like
he's doing I know he's doing a new show. I don't know if it's on Discovery or Nat Geo, but he had a new show come out on that. But I mean, some of those hunts, like I've watched him do Pennsylvania flintlock. I've watched him he got the governor's tag for a bull elk in Kentucky. And like, those are cool hunts because you don't see anybody else doing those really from like a bigger level or a higher level. You know, you see, not that it, you know, you see the normal elk hunts out west and stuff like that, but it seems like he always tries to find, and that's always been his thing, is like what's unique, you know, how to make it unique and stuff. So,
well, and that's probably what I'm trying to say there is I would hone in on like what's diehard whitetail content.
Yeah, which is not that.
And that's fine. You know what I mean? That's what I guess I'm saying, and more of like.
But that's been Mark's style forever.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
In fact, I didn't know that like that was what they hunted. Period. Like I figured, kind of like most Midwest, Northeast guys, like, you know, whatever season it was, you hunted basically. But yeah, that makes sense now. Obviously, understanding the effort and the focus into Wired to Hunt being whitetail, like that's his thing.
Yeah,
it's his jam.
Well, it's cool. Yeah, and he does a nice job with it. I mean, he represents, I think, us well. You know, on that medium. So
yeah, for sure. And now he's tied in. Like, I know Tony Peterson is doing some stuff with him on the Wired to Hunt side. So it's cool to see, you know, more engagement and different viewpoints on that. But yeah, it's wild, man. I mean, kudos to him. What a cool kind of time frame there of like working for such a company like Google and then going in and developing your own thing. And then, you know, who would have thought, 7 years later, it gets acquired by, you know, what now is one of the larger brands in the entire space.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of wild how all that comes together. And very cool of them to donate the back 40 to the NDA.
Yeah. And still fighting for access, just like us.
Yeah, hard to believe, too.
Yeah,
it's everybody.
It's everybody.
When you listen to this and we say, like, you don't think you're alone in it. Like, it is not easy to get access. It's harder and harder. It's harder and harder every season. And you know, not to be the Debbie Downer, it's going to continue to get harder and harder every season as long as there's competition and number of hunters and liberal seasons. Mm-hmm. That's just how it's going to be. It's, you know, there's only so much of it out there. So yeah, unless things change, kind of expect it to be the same next year.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. So anyways, we appreciate Mark Kenyon joining us here on HUNTR Podcast, and we'll hopefully catch up with him later in the year. And we appreciate y'all listening. We'll catch y'all next week.
Later.
Take me